At the gala, beneath golden chandeliers and polished laughter, he held his secretary as though she were his wife. He never knew. His real wife stood in the shadows, watching every stolen smile, every rehearsed whisper. And in that moment, I learned the kind of silence that cuts deeper than screams. The night shimmered with grandeur, as though the world itself had dressed in its finest attire. The chandeliers hung like crowns of crystal from the high ceiling, scattering golden light across the marble floors where women in satin gowns floated like living jewels. Waiters glided silently, balancing silver trays filled with champagne, while laughter rippled through the hall like music. To anyone else, this gala was perfection, a dream carved into reality. But to me, it was the moment my dream of marriage shattered into sharp fragments. I had debated coming. When the ivory-colored invitation arrived with its embossed lettering and faint lavender scent, I had turned it over in my hands for days. Part of me thought to ignore it, to stay home, to preserve what little peace I had left. But another part, the stronger part, whispered that I needed to see for myself what my heart already feared. So, I dressed. Not for him, not for anyone else, but for me. A simple black gown, understated yet commanding, hugged my frame. Around my neck, I fastened my mother's necklace, a reminder that some things, unlike vows, could endure. From the balcony above the main floor, I spotted him almost instantly. Ethan, my husband of 8 years. His tall frame was unmistakable, clothed in a perfectly tailored navy suit that accentuated his easy confidence. He looked like he belonged there, as though the crowd orbited around him. And perhaps they did. He had always had that charisma, the ability to draw people in, to make them laugh, to make them believe. But it wasn't him that twisted something deep inside me. It was her, Claire, his secretary, younger, vibrant, with waves of golden hair cascading down her back. She stood pressed against him, her hand looped possessively around his arm, her head tilted just so, laughing too easily at his words. I watched, frozen, as his hand rested gently on the small of her back. Too natural, too intimate. It was the touch of a man at home, not at work. To everyone else, they looked like a married couple basking in their shared success. To me, it was betrayal paraded under chandeliers. My fingers tightened around the glass of champagne I hadn't tasted. I wanted to move, to scream, to demand an explanation that deep down I already knew. But instead, I stood very still. My body may have been trembling, but my face was carved in stone. The silence within me was deafening. I thought heartbreak would feel like shattering glass, but no, it was ice spreading through my veins, freezing every ounce of warmth I had once carried for him. It wasn't just tonight, I realized. The long nights at the office. The hushed phone calls he always answered in the hallway. The growing distance in our home. The way his gaze no longer lingered on me. The way his laughter had gone silent at our dinner table. It all connected now. Tonight wasn't the beginning. It was merely the unveiling. And yet, I couldn't leave. Not yet. I needed to see him clearly, stripped of the illusions I had wrapped around him for years. I needed to watch, to learn, to accept. The gala swirled around me, oblivious to the storm inside my chest. Musicians played, couples danced, conversations sparkled. But my eyes never left them. Ethan leaned closer to whisper something in Claire's ear, and she threw her head back in laughter. His smile lit up his entire face, the kind of smile that had once belonged only to me. My throat tightened. I remembered our wedding day, his trembling voice as he vowed forever. The way he had kissed me under a canopy of roses, eyes glistening with what I thought was devotion. I remember the nights we lay awake talking about dreams, about children we never had, about the future we believed was ours. Every memory felt like a cruel trick now, a story written by someone I no longer recognized. At one point, he excused himself from Claire and mingled with other guests. But she followed him like a shadow tethered to his light, her hand never leaving his arm. Their connection wasn't secret, it was bold, deliberate, unapologetic. Almost as though he wanted me to see, to feel the sting of being replaced. And then came the toast. He raised his glass high, his other arm still resting snugly around her waist. His voice carried easily through the hall. To loyalty and success, he declared, his grin dazzling. The crowd erupted into applause, laughter, clinking glasses. My lips twisted into a bitter smile. Loyalty. A word he spoke with such ease, as if he had forgotten what it meant. I lifted my glass too, though I didn't drink. Instead, I stared at the golden liquid inside, thinking how fragile it looked, how easily it could spill and stain. Much like marriage, much like love, the evening blurred on. I couldn't tell you how long I stood there, watching. Every minute stretched into hours, every smile between them carved deeper into me. Yet strangely, I didn't collapse. My heart didn't break into sobs. No, it hardened. It turned into something steady, unyielding. By the time the final notes of music faded and the guests began to leave, my decision had already taken root. I would not confront him tonight, not in anger, not in desperation. That would give him power. Instead, I would bide my time. I would gather my strength. And when I finally chose to speak, my voice would not tremble. Because betrayal does not deserve tears. It deserves truth. I walked out into the night air, the city lights flickering like scattered stars against the darkness. The cool breeze wrapped around me, drying the heat that threatened to spill from my eyes. Somewhere inside the gala, Ethan still laughed, still played his part. But I no longer belonged to that script. For the first time in years, I felt something new, clarity. He thought he owned the stage, the crowd, the illusion. But what he never imagined was that the quiet woman in the shadows, the wife he discarded, would soon hold the final word. And when I finally spoke, the entire gala would remember the sound of my truth. The next morning, he returned home as if nothing had happened. But silence has a way of speaking louder than words. And mine was about to roar. Dash dash dash. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, painting the room in soft amber light, but it couldn't soften the hollowness that filled our home. I was seated by the window, a cup of untouched coffee cooling in my hands, when I heard the familiar click of the front door. He entered with the same casual air he always carried, whistling under his breath, as though the world had been kind to him, as though the night before hadn't happened. His suit jacket was slung over his shoulder, his tie loosened, his hair slightly ruffled. To anyone else, he would look like a hard-working man returning home after a long night. But to me, every detail screamed of betrayal. Long night, Ethan muttered, tossing his jacket carelessly over a chair. He didn't meet my eyes. He hadn't, not really, in months. Yes, I replied, my voice even. Too even. He didn't notice the sharpness hidden beneath its calm. He poured himself a glass of water, took a long sip, and walked past me as though I were a piece of furniture rather than his wife. I sat in silence, watching his every move. My heart still clenched, but not in the same way it had last night. The storm of grief had passed. What remained was steel, forged from every lie he had told, every late night he had excused, every whisper I had overheard but pretended not to understand. For days, I said nothing. I played my part, cooking meals, folding laundry, maintaining the fragile facade of normalcy. But beneath it all, I was gathering strength. I wasn't planning revenge, not the kind that explodes in chaos. No, I was preparing a revelation. Something undeniable. Something he could never twist into his favor. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Another gala was announced, grander than the first, brimming with promise of networking, publicity, and praise. It was the kind of event Ethan thrived in. I knew he would take Claire again, presenting her boldly as though she had always belonged on his arm. And I knew I had to be there, not in the shadows this time, but in full view, with the strength of a woman who refused to remain invisible. I spent the following week in quiet preparation. Not of words, but of myself. I chose a gown that was elegant without being ostentatious, sapphire blue that shimmered under light, a color that spoke of dignity rather than desperation. I had my hair styled simply, my makeup subtle yet commanding. When I looked at my reflection that evening, I didn't see the broken woman who had stood trembling in the balcony. I saw someone new, someone reborn in silence. When I arrived, the ballroom was buzzing with energy. Photographers clustered near the entrance, flashes of light bouncing off sequined gowns and polished shoes. Conversations hummed, laughter echoed. The moment I stepped inside, heads turned. It wasn't my dress, nor my jewels, it was the way I carried myself. With steadiness, with quiet fire. And then I saw him. Ethan, standing tall, his hand once again clasped firmly around Claire's waist. They were laughing, as they had last week, basking in the illusion of a love story that wasn't theirs to tell. But this time, when his gaze traveled lazily across the room and landed on me, the smile faltered. His eyes widened for a fraction of a second, just long enough for me to see the unease flicker beneath his charm. I didn't look away. My eyes met his with unwavering calm. I saw confusion in his stare, maybe even a hint of fear. He hadn't expected me here. He certainly hadn't expected me like this. The evening unfolded, the usual cascade of speeches and toasts, the same rhythm of applause and flattery. I moved gracefully among the guests, speaking politely, laughing softly, showing the world that I was more than just his wife. People noticed. They asked questions. And slowly, the narrative began to shift. Then the moment came. The host of the evening, recognizing me as Ethan's wife and wanting to honor his success, invited me to the stage to say a few words. I felt the room hold its breath as I rose. Ethan stiffened where he stood, his hand tightening around Claire's waist. She glanced up at him, uneasy. I climbed the steps slowly, deliberately, each click of my heels echoing through the hall. The microphone waited, glinting under the lights. I wrapped my fingers around it, steady as stone, and looked out at the sea of faces. My gaze paused on Ethan. His confidence was cracking, though he tried to mask it with a forced smile. I was asked to speak about loyalty and success. I began, my voice carrying through the silence. The room hushed, every word threading into the air like a string pulled taut. Loyalty, I continued, is not measured by appearances. It is not about who you hold in public, or what promises you make in front of an audience. Loyalty is what you honor when no one is watching. It is about keeping your word when it would be easier to break it. It is about valuing the people who built you up, not discarding them once you have risen. A murmur swept through the audience. I saw the recognition in their eyes, the slow dawning of truth. Claire shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny, her grip on Ethan's arm loosening. I smiled faintly, not with bitterness, but with strength. Success, without loyalty, is emptiness. You can stand under the brightest chandeliers, be praised by the loudest crowds, but if your victories are built on betrayal, they will eventually collapse. I let the silence stretch. The weight of my words pressed heavily against the hall. Then I took a breath and finished. Tonight, I don't stand here as the wife of a celebrated man. I stand here as a woman who has learned that her worth is not measured by someone else's lies. My worth is measured by my choice to rise, to walk away, and to never again mistake betrayal for love. I placed the microphone back on the stand, my hand steady, and turned to leave. Gasps rose, whispers filled the air like a tide. All eyes were on Ethan now, his carefully built image unraveling thread by thread under the weight of truth. He tried to follow me, his voice breaking through the noise. Wait, please. But the crowd closed in, their curiosity, their judgment, their shock forming a wall between us. Claire stood frozen, no longer the woman clinging proudly to his side, but a shadow exposed under the harshest light. I didn't look back. Each step I took out of that hall felt like shedding chains. By the time the cool night air kissed my skin, I was lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I breathed without weight pressing on my chest. The next morning, the papers buzzed with headlines. A scandal, a wife's speech, a truth that shattered illusions in the most glamorous of halls. But for me, it wasn't about scandal. It wasn't about humiliating him. It was about reclaiming myself. I wasn't the woman in the shadows anymore. I wasn't the silent observer of betrayal. I was the voice that refused to tremble, the strength that refused to bow, the woman who remembered her worth even when someone else forgot it. Sometimes, the deepest betrayals are blessings in disguise. They push us to rise, to remember who we are beyond the lies we've endured. And when someone forgets your worth, don't waste your life reminding them. Walk away, rise higher, and let the silence of your strength echo louder than their betrayal ever could.